All right. Well, welcome back, revelers. I see some of you guys stuck around from the last interview. So we're getting ready to do our next interview, and this one's going to be for the U.S. House of Representatives, Texas's second congressional district. This would be a seat that is currently occupied by one Daniel Crenshaw. The guy's a veteran, but not exactly the biggest fan. So we're going to be talking to Peter, who would like to take his seat away. This one may seem strange to some people because being a libertarian, they would think that I would be more in line with Dan Crenshaw. But as a libertarian, I believe in a lot more of the social policies of Democrats and disagree more on the fiscal side. So we're going to go ahead and talk to him. We're going to let him introduce himself here. So, Peter, welcome. Are you able to hear me okay?
Thanks, guys. I can hear you actually outstandingly.
Okay.
It's Rob, right?
Yeah, it's Rob. So
You're
thank you
Rob,
again
right?
for joining us here on.
Hey, Rob.
Yep, I'm Rob. So thanks for joining us. And hey, he even put in there is the full race. He's for the House District number 2, as I was saying, running against Dan Crenshaw, who of course did not respond to my request for interview, but hey, it is what it is. So initially, go ahead and introduce yourself and why you're running for the seat.
Outstanding, Rob. Yeah, and of course, I really appreciate the opportunity. This is an exceptional platform for me to reach out, and I did hear from your promo coming in that you're a libertarian, and I love that. That's really like thinking about the Bill of Rights and all of our constitutional freedoms that we have, and like I hold near and dear as much as I'm the Democratic nominee, the U.S. House Texas District 2. I'm also have quite a bit of conservative values, which I hope to be able to speak about a little bit here. But so why I decided to be the Democratic Party, to run with the Democratic Party, folks, and Rob, is so pretty much that's where my majority of my values align. And my background, I'm from New York, so the suburbs of New York City, and I grew up just with a love of the environment and very passionate and enthusiastic, like in the sales. My dad was a textile converter in sales, a Navy lieutenant from the Navy, and a naval instructor. So part of my ethics, my integrity, just my honesty, and just my genuine fun-loving Mr. Filler is partly from my dad, Wallace Filler. So he just instilled those core values in me. Just be ethical, and people will just appreciate you for who you are. So, and why I decided to run, I just felt Dan Crenshaw is vulnerable. Like I'm a talker. I like to listen to talk stations and watch the news, and I just kept hearing like a repetitive narrative that was Republican stronghold slip into Democratic control after the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and of course the insurrection at the Capitol, Rob. So I just started like reading the tea leaves, so to speak, and seeing the thing, and then I recalled that Dan Crenshaw was my representative and how unpopular and how unliked he is. So I thought it's a perfect chance for me to at least make a run at it, see what I could do, and like to me, it's a win-win. I'm getting a lot of interviews and a chance to speak about my personal views, which I'm sure you'll ask me a lot of outstanding questions, and just a chance to give Dan Crenshaw a run for his money because I don't think that he's really been challenged in a way to really challenging his his stances, behaviors, and that's what I'm. And I'm sure I'll never have a debate like this with him because, like you said, he doesn't respond. But I'm sure he's probably hearing my messages and, if anything, getting him to pivot a little bit, like just the way he is. So I hope that answered your first question pretty good there, Rob. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be with to be with you here on your program. It's an
Well,
honor. So thank you.
and when I went in, when I make the clips, I'm going to make sure to tag Dan Crenshaw in them. So maybe that'll also help him like come and answer for some things. But yeah, I don't like him, so I don't know if he'll come on. So let's see here. Oh, where's the guy? So you actually already brought up one of the biggest ones, but I'm going to try and go and kind of like the order of what people are saying is important to them.
Okay.
Oh, looks like Peter jumped. Oh, I bet he's on the Eastern time zone. Okay, so that's interesting.
Me? I'm on this.
So
It's Central Time here. So we're at 6:27.
yeah,
How about
I'm
you? Where are you
guessing.
at, Rob?
So the next interview I had scheduled was for Peter Sonsky, who is the Solidarity Party candidate. So he just popped in. He's the one that just popped in.
Nice. Well, it's 7:30 Eastern, so we're double booked here.
Yeah. So when I sent the invite, I thought I mentioned Central Time, but let's see. Anyway, so to start out, we'll go ahead and start with the biggest one. It's the economy. How would you attack the economy? That's because I do when I ask this question, I actually kind of preface it with one little point. We're showing some GDP growth around 2%, but our inflation rate on certain things are higher, like 20%. And the easiest example is cars. If you sell $100 million worth of cars for $20,000, that's 5,000 cars. But if the inflation's 20%, the cars now cost $24,000, and that's only 4,100 cars, and you get the same amount. So, but you're making, selling, financing 1,000 less cars almost. So,
Right.
while our numbers say we're up 2%, when you take into account the full scale of inflation, we're actually receding as far as what's being produced, what's being sold, and what's being financed in the country.
Wow. Well, it's a tough question. It's a conundrum. Yeah. So what's the right answer, right? What's my stance on the economy? All right. Well, again, thanks for the outstanding question. So it's a lot to unpack there. So we can start with some of the facts that you just gave me here about the economy.
I think you froze there.
I would like to work on the budget committee, like balancing our budget. And then, I'm sorry. What I do know, Rob, is
you're in and out, but we'll just push through.
I know. Let's just let this hang here. So, what I would like to say is what I do know is what has been talking about is how they're planning to battle corporate greed and price gouging. So as far as I could tell, like Kroger is a supermarket here, and they just let out some news that they're doing just as you know, it's been 4 years now. We're just recovering from the pandemic, and a lot of what we're seeing, is related to that in the first, I guess, year or two. That would make sense, like cause and effect. That we had a pandemic, everything was shut down. So when things came back online, the prices they were just going up, and even Joe Biden made a joke about shrinkflation. So what would I do, Peter Phil, the voice of reason? Call myself the voice of reason because I'm a reasonable Democrat. I just like to think about like solutions. So I would do the same as her. Try to focus on control our controllables. If it's corporate gouging, corporate welfare, whatever it is, like let's knock that out. I would, if you want to talk about economy, since I'm a resource management major, so that was forestry. We're in the greatest country, like as far as geographically, we have all this great, outstanding land. A lot of it's public, a lot of it's private. But I would do forestry, like grow chestnut, all those like the good lumber, like the lumber trees, wild cherry, all the good trees that like we can get lumber, so we could potentially. This is one potential that hasn't been talked about. Of course, cannabis and marijuana. That would be right there a great source of revenue to help stimulate our economy. Because Robert, I don't know what your thought is. My thought is we're the divided states of America when it comes to marijuana and cannabis. Like, so Texas is like we have 3.3% CBD and THC. So there is some revenue being generated from that, like THC, like light or whatever. But if there a real marijuana market and cannabis across the entire country that we could regulate and tax, that could be a place where we can uh, help to grow our economy. So, thanks for the question. As a representative, I would help. I would do my best to help the local economy here by with appropriations, because appropriations come back to our district, and there's different ways that we can help to do projects to stimulate our economy, and to like little seed money for little projects that will help the people that we need the most help, and potentially help people to start local businesses here in Houston, Texas. So congressional district 2 is North Houston, and just a little bit of South Montgomery, which is a town called the Woodlands. So it's quite conservative, but I feel I'll do well.
Oh, I'm up
So
here in
hope that
Crockett,
answers.
Texas, so I know exactly where you're at.
Outstanding.
I'm
So,
I'm in Crockett, so I'm up here by Huntsville.
oh, Huntsville. Yeah, they're like, yeah, I have a little property up
I
in
know that's out. I
Livingston.
know that's outside your district, but yeah, I lived in Spring for a long time, and then I built a little tiny house in Livingston, and now I'm living out here by Crockett. So okay, so on this one, and I'm not going to beat you up about this one, but I'm gonna tell you, you picked a fun example for me, because my bachelor's was in accounting, and I worked in corporate management for large retail corporations, including
Okay,
Kroger. Okay,
right on.
so
You will help.
okay, so on the actual groceries and stuff, that inflation has nothing to do with the company selling them. Groceries, they average 1% profit on groceries. Okay. Uh the textiles like clothing and apparel, stuff like that, their gross margins are usually a little bit higher, but by the time you like calculate
Mhm.
all the wages, transportation, housing, everything runs at about 1%. So if you go and look at the company's financial statements and look at where their revenues are, their actual ROI is ridiculously small, and they kind of juice by investing in other things to add in additional revenue, or by renting out space in the shopping centers that they own to other stores, stuff like that. Okay. So but the actual revenue, it's not on price gouging. Now, what you do see in retail is you see zone pricing. So, like if I have a chain of
Okay.
stores, and in one stores nothing's getting stolen, then I can keep that price as low as possible. But then if I have a store, say over outside of the University of Houston area, and I think you know the area that I'm talking about there in Houston, I'm going to have high shrink,
Yeah.
which is inventory that disappears for whatever reason. Okay. So if I've got high shrink, then I need to get more money out of those items in order to turn even a 1% profit. And I think if you try and say that a company can't make 1% on, 1 cent on every dollar that they spend, that's kind of crazy. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they are going to have to, in order to keep those stores open, then they're going to have to raise the prices for those stores, or spread it out and make the people in other places that aren't stealing stuff pay more. So there's more zone pricing. So if the community shopping at the store is stealing from the store, that community is going to end up paying the difference, but it still comes down to working out to be about a 1% margin. Okay. So on the inflation, I've got to push back
Agree.
on you right there, because our money supply has increased by 40%, and on some items our inflation is as high as 40%. They really pick and choose what they put in the official rate of 9%, but it's actually more like 20, 30, 40% depending on the items. A lot of the stuff that you go to Home Depot and buy, it's up 100%. Like the wood materials, raw materials, stuff like that. A lot of that's up even more than that. And why is it up? Because a bunch of lumber yards ended up shutting down during the pandemic, and it costs millions of dollars to get them open again. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
things contributing on it. And I'd say the biggest one, the first one right off the bat, would be the pricing in of the money supply. So now that's the Federal Reserve.
Well,
so
you're
it's
I was gonna say you're the so you have the economy background. If you were the representative, try to put that question. So, what would you do to help with the economy?
Well, first and foremost, I would think that the Congress needs to start limiting the power of the Fed, their ability to print money. They also need to run a budget like a business, and not saying that they should make a profit, but we currently have $1 trillion in obligations every year for servicing our debt. Okay. We have,
Right.
it just crossed over $1 trillion. So we need to set like 1.2 trillion aside for paying on our debt and paying it down. Okay. Which leaves $3 trillion that the government can spend. That's your budget to spend, and you can't go over it, and you can't do additional appropriations after. Okay. And you can't separate all these things into different packages, because they put these budgets that are like 6.5 trillion, and then the government, by the time you get to the end of the year, they actually spent like 8 trillion. You get what I'm saying? Well, where's all that money coming from? They're printing it, which is increasing the money supply, but the number of goods coming out, and I gave you the demonstration. It shows, okay, so the GDP, that means the gross sales are up by 2%. But when the prices are up, that means we're 20%. We're selling 18% less product. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like, yeah. So part of the issue is money supply, and part of the issue is the federal budget, because they refuse to follow the revenues that they have coming in. Like, we don't have any major wars going on. We don't have any of this going on, so we don't need to support extended foreign operations. There's a lot of countries that we give foreign aid to that are not our allies. So there's a lot of place we can trim fat. And then we can also like point to there's 12 cabinet departments, and yet we have 5,000 government agencies. And who's supposed to oversee the government agencies when we've got 500 members of Congress and 5,000 agencies? The oversight's not happening. So I think a big fat bloated federal government is a big part of the problem. So the first thing would be paring back spending and actually spending down some of that debt, and then mandating that the Federal Reserve reduce the money supply, because that's going to cause deflation. It would be need to be very measured, so you don't end up in a deflationary spiral. But printing more money and spending more money is going to do the opposite. And trying to blame the companies. Walmart, for example, would be one of the companies she's accusing of price gouging. So what are you going to do? Put them out of business and 2 million people lose their jobs?
That would certainly be counterproductive. That would not be the end goal, but maybe just to bring it to the news, and then hopefully they'll self-regulate. Like, that's what I'm noticing. A lot of this, like, shame. I don't know for sure, but every single state strategy, like these calls.
Yeah, every single state has the ability to regulate their local markets, and they already all have laws against price gouging. So what that is Kamala Harris talking about price gouging is making an excuse for inflation that runaway spending caused, because she was the tie-breaking vote on all that spending. So if she doesn't blame it on somebody else, she's got to take responsibility for her part in it.
100%.
And that's my perspective.
What? And that was one of the
I said that, and that's my perspective, coming with the macroeconomic and the microeconomic viewpoint of it, because I've seen all the way down from the ground level, small businesses, huge corporations. I worked in the largest retailer in the grocery segment, the largest retailer in the world, then the new largest retailer in the world, then the new largest retailer in the world. 3 different companies, and they kept overtaking each other. After I went to the new one, we became the new largest retailer in the world. I worked for the largest home improvement retailer in the world, the largest small box chain in the world by a number of locations, outside of 7-Eleven, but most of those are licensed shops, not actually 7-Eleven stores. So I've got a lot of experience dealing with all different sizes of business. and businesses are barely running. And if you really break down, so they sit there and say, oh, this company like made $500 billion. Yeah, they made $500 billion on 50 trillion transactions. You know what I mean? So they made a penny here, a penny there, a penny there, a penny there. It ends up being a big pile, but you can't cut out that penny and make the pile smaller. And then the owners of the business, the stockholders, well, that's also the American 401ks that they're going to retire on. The federal government has money in some of these investments as well. So you can't start attacking their ability to make money, because that is business, and small businesses need to make money. And every law that we pass affects everybody in the country, including small businesses. The only people that are ever exempted from businesses from laws passed by Congress are the members of Congress. So that's my perspective on the economy.
Which, as far as I could tell,
so I mean,
100% the.
So and then the other big thing, as much as I think just Donald Trump is a pig, he does point out one thing: energy costs drives everything up, and we need to get more refineries open, and we need to get more energy going, because every single item that you have, it uses fuel to mine the materials, fuel to transmit the materials to the refining facility, fuel to take it from the refiner. Not to mention, all these places are using energy to do their job as well. And then you have to transport it to the component manufacturers, and then from the component manufacturers, the final product manufacturers, the final product manufacturers to the distributors to the retailers, and then the retailers home. So ridiculously taxing fuel. That means the consumer at the end of a fuel tax, they're fuel taxed 10 times on one item. So get rid of the fuel taxes and find another way to tax, so you're not taxing single items over and over. The second part of it, bringing the fuel costs down by like unchaining what is the cleanest energy production in the world, because the energy appetite's not going to go down. It's going to keep going up. We need to keep working on alternative energies, nuclear energy, stuff like that. But until we have the electrical grid, we can't even switch to electric cars, and we don't have the resources to do electric cars. We'll never have electric cars for enough to make the batteries for electric cars for just the transportation, much less the personal vehicles. The resources we just don't have access to those resources. So you increase the fuel production in the country that does it efficiently, reduce the taxes on that fuel, and that's going to bring down the underlying costs, and then you end up opening up competition even more. And then people will be like, okay, well, I can lower the price here to get the sales away from my competitor. And then the competitor lowers their price. Now they're competing for customers instead of just trying to, stay afloat. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. Unless there was some sort of paradigm shift with how we, generate electricity. So, it's a far-fetched idea, but there is something, like 0-point energy. There's other like we're just kind of going down the same road of this keep repeating the same, like with every example that you just gave me, Rob, which they were all outstanding. So it doesn't really lead to any sort of solution other than just like a little off the top here, take a little here, and just kind of at the same end result. So other than if we like write some outstanding bills to say cut some of this federal spending, and then have someone like yourself, like testifying up in Congress, like why we need to say either cut back our military spending or doing something, because it's like you said, 1.2 trillion in every 9 months or so that we're paying just to service this debt. So it's not sustainable, and then they keep doing these CRs, just kicking the can down the road and not actually having a budget. So I would hope to be part of the solution.
And those CRs are creating more debt, every single one, and we're not paying down our debt or any of that. And on the energy standpoint, we have the solution, and that's nuclear. And nuclear can be safe. It absolutely can be. And we have better technology than we had when the 3 Mile incident happened. Our technology is far better than the Chernobyl. And if you do a little research, in addition to the test that they were running that night, there was also an earthquake that night when Chernobyl happened. in an area that never gets earthquakes, so we don't know what the ability for that facility to withstand an earthquake was. You get what I'm saying? So the cleanest, most efficient, and cheapest energy production we have is nuclear waste, but we've made it almost impossible through regulatory burden to build a nuclear power plant. We could build new refineries that make even cleaner fuel, except for the fact that the regulatory burden's so high that we can't get anybody to build them. And the government shouldn't be in business, so the government shouldn't be supplementing this. The government needs to create an environment that's efficient for people to do that. And that includes extra incentives for researching alternative energy, like zero point energy, geomagnetic energy. Like, we've got a giant magnetic sphere. We should be able to pull some energy off of that.
Right.
So solar sounds great, but there's not a single solar panel out there that gets more than 20% fuel efficiency. And then wind, there's lots of ecological damage that's done with the big wind farms. They look horrible. They make the land around it useless. And then they're ridiculous. Like, I just drove through one the other day coming back from Arizona here to Texas, and like, you can see oil spots all over on the ground. So you can't call that eco. And they all need fossil fuels to keep running, because you have to use fossil fuels to lubricate them. So I mean, right now we're the cleanest. Yeah. Well, and
I wish.
imagine how much cheaper our fuel would be if we didn't have to sell half of our oil across the sea because we don't have a refinery that can refine it.
Yeah.
So there's craziness, but the number one thing is the budget just has to be cut. And our government, to me, was set up to protect people from other people, sometimes inside the country, some outside the country. And the government has just massively exceeded that mandate, as demonstrated by the fact that we have 5,000 agencies, and 90% of those agencies replicate what the states already have. The federal government was not supposed to be in control of everything. The states were supposed to be in control of everything, and the federal government coordinated the work between the states. Does that make sense?
Of course.
So prior to the Civil War, we are even referred to in the plural because each state was considered like an autonomous country. So if you look at writing before the Civil War, it was the United States are, and now it's the United States is. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but we need to remember that the whole foundation of our country was set up to run on independent states taking care of their people, and the federal government facilitating cooperation, so we can have these diverse states and diverse terrains making one unified country. Does that make sense?
Of course.
So
back to that.
But that doesn't mean the government has to spend all the money to do everything. I think private industry does everything better. I challenge anybody I interview to name one thing that the federal government does well, other than spend money.
Good question. Then we entertain us for sure. So we give us a lot to talk about. So that's one good thing. It's entertaining for sure.
Yeah,
we are talking about it.
So I mean, so that's like, if you get into Congress, I hope you immediately start diving into the numbers, because when you start looking at the things that the federal government spends money on, it would blow your freaking mind. I've spent hours going through these bills. I've spent hours going through the financial statements. Like, even here in the state of Texas, I'm sitting here going, why did the state of Texas pay $9 billion to an aircraft manufacturing company?
Why?
I don't know. I couldn't find an explanation why they were paying it to it, but you can find it in the accounting. And they were like the fourth largest recipient of money from the state of Texas.
Wow.
I don't know.
Some all right, so what I did hear about, one good news that I did hear is that Texas is going to tie into the national grid. So like our ice storms, and where we completely have no power in Texas. I think that hopefully that'll be a thing of the past. That's what I heard, that I don't know if it was the Texas Energy Commission or some sort of deal with the federal government, but Texas will in fact be tied into Louisiana, I believe Oklahoma, Arizona, some of the neighboring power grids, so that if and when these disastrous things happen here, hurricanes, ice storms, whatever it was or is, that'll be a thing of the past where we're completely down. Our ERCOT grid won't be completely shut down anymore. So that's one bit of good news that I did hear about our power situation here in Texas. That like little tin cans and strings that seems like it's holding this thing together.
Well, what happened? But see, that's not going to help us in Texas. We have some of the cheapest energy in the country, so we're going to connect to the rest of the country and let them buy our energy out from under us in the hopes that if we have an emergency, we have it. Well, how about we just fix the problems that we have here in Texas, which is the winterization of our power plants and the reliance on stuff like wind and solar power that doesn't work in the winter. That's what caused the power outages.
Right.
The plants aren't winterized, and there was a directive to winterize, and none of the energy producers winterized the plants. So they adjusted. Yeah. But we shouldn't have to worry about it anyways, because global warming's coming, so it's going to be so warm we shouldn't see another icy winter in Texas, right?
Yeah, climate change. It's a stinging bee, and it can hit us both ways. So we're extremely cold, extremely hot.
So climate change is one thing that I don't really bother discussing, and the reason I don't bother discussing it is because every single decade since the 1960s, the Democrats have been talking about some impending disaster of the climate. It was the impending ice age, acid rain, ozone layer, global warming. Well, then the temperatures didn't really beat what they said was going to happen with global warming. So then they make it more abstract and call it climate change. And then they make, the storms are going to be more powerful and whatever. This hurricane season has been the least active hurricane season in 20 years. Now, there's been some horrific tragedies, but the deaths from natural disasters are actually down, not up. The damage numbers are up because everything costs more to rebuild now.
Thanks to the National Weather Service, Project 2025, who wants to do away with that. But that's not a side note. I'm running for Congress. It's not running for president. But thank you. That was a spirited conversation.
Right. Well, I mean, but you've got it. But you've got to vote in, vote out, right?
That's right. And actually be productive up there, which is what I'd like to do. I want to work on the committees and work in a spirited bipartisan fashion to work for the betterment of our country.
Yeah. Well, the most disappointing thing for me being here in Texas is I look at the records, where my house was. I was getting ready to move, so I didn't bother. I almost ran for the House of Representatives because in my old district, the person representing me had been in Congress for 6 years and never produced a single bill. So you're just going there to yes sir for somebody else? Yeah, that's not what I call representation.
Not at all.
So let's now, coming off of the economy, another thing that's really stressing the economy would be healthcare. So what's your solution in healthcare? I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, and I hope you don't.
Okay, well, so healthcare costs going up, is that what you mean? How do we,
yeah.
Is that what the question is? How do we get better healthcare? Or
yeah, exactly. Because when I lost the insurance that I had, in private enterprise, I lost the insurance I had when the Affordable Care Act came out. I was offered new plans that were worse, and then now that I'm no longer working in these fields, it's absolutely impossible to be able to afford the insurance plans. So, what's the solution? I don't qualify for any government assistance on it. So what's the solution? What's the solution to get the cost down?
So to get the cost down, oh man, tough questions, but great questions. They're thought-provoking questions, Rob. Well, let me give you not deflecting, but let me say if and when I'm the representative here in U.S. House Texas District 2, well, my office would be a working office, so I would just invite people to come to my office. Let's really look at your situation. I think it probably just goes on a case-by-case basis. So I would really just invite you to the office. We can really just see what seems to be your concern with not being able to get either affordable health insurance through the markets, because there's other companies besides, I'm familiar with, like there's Cigna companies that you can buy health provided through your employer. Like, so if you're not fortunate enough, like work for a company that's offering and then offering to pay some of it. So I know that the costs are skyrocketing. There's no secret. There's no secret behind that, and probably a similar sort of dynamic, which I'm sure there's underlying costs that, of course, the companies have, but there must be somebody getting very rich off of the few. So we really need to look closely, like you said, looking at crunching who has the most to gain from like these cost price gouging, or just the prices of these going up. And then when it comes to just simple like helping, so that would be the federal government stepping in, like with appropriations back home. Like, so if you need help, come to the office. If you qualify, we'll help. Kind of like an employer would, like cover some of your costs, because each year our district gets about $50 million a year. And I noticed Dan Crenshaw, it's always to the same company or companies, like it's infrastructure, which we need, but a lot of the other representatives, what I've noticed as I studied them in around Houston area, that they appropriated for different projects. So one of those projects could be like I call it a Have a Heart initiative, Rob, so that you would come in, if you qualify, like your income's either too high or too low for a current situation, like you're not getting insurance, or if it's too low, you just need a little help, like whatever it is. So I would be there to like help with, say cover your cost each month of your insurance just by using little appropriations to help. So those are my thoughts. So what are your thoughts?
Okay. Well, that's cool that you asked. So, do you know what the number one biggest single expenditure for hospitals and doctors is?
Condoms? I don't know.
Malpractice insurance.
Okay.
Because if a doctor makes an honest mistake of a millimeter, they can get sued for $20 million. So
Right.
number one thing that needs to happen is tort reform. So here's the problem getting tort reform in Congress. 90% of those guys are lawyers, and when they leave Congress, they want to be able to continue to do their field. So they're not going to limit their own earning potential by limiting lawsuits to realistic numbers. Although I think it should be 100% feasible, due to the fact that using the civil system to do ungodly punishments is no different than if the government was levying ungodly punishments. Like this Alex Jones sorry, I almost said it. This jerk, Alex Jones. Okay. Should he be punished? Maybe.
Yep.
But he was exercising free
But not
speech. Nobody
right.
forced those people to watch his show. Any of their claims that they got death threats and stuff, he didn't tell anybody to go attack these people. He's not responsible for idiots' behavior. So like when did I lose you? So like, when Bernie Sanders was calling for action, nobody said he was actually responsible when somebody went to the event and shot a candidate or a senator, right?
Right.
That wasn't his fault. You know what I mean? So unless
I
you're
do.
calling for something to happen, you're not responsible for it. Yet this guy, through civil torts, his company's going to be sold off. He's not going to have anything. Now, should he have been hit with a libel charge? Probably, since he's presenting himself as media. But destroying somebody's life when he didn't destroy their life, it's kind of unrealistic, especially when we have a criminal justice system where murderers go to jail for 6 years and get out. Rapists mentally destroy kids, molesting them, and they get out. And yet they're trying to like destroy people using civil processes. So tort reform would fix a lot of that across the board in a lot of areas of society, but specifically in the medical field. The second part of that is if you understand the dynamics of a free market, there's two things that determine the prices: supply and demand. If something's in short supply, but there's a lot of demand, the price is going to go up. Okay, so why is it that we have 300 companies, 400 companies that provide health insurance in this country, but only a few of the biggest ones operate in more than one state. And even there, they have to set up separate companies because they're not able to operate across the country and provide a big market. Then you've got all these guys making huger pools so they can average out the expenses of the people that are sick. And if they're able to get the price down and average out the risks of covering people that are ill, then you're going to get more people that are younger. Then it's an expense that's worthwhile to them, so they have it just in case. You know what I mean? Because with our current system, part of the reason that the prices are so far up is younger, healthier people are leaving the system and they're not participating because it's too expensive for something they're never using. You get what I'm saying? And the idea of setting
100%.
aside funds, the idea of setting aside funds to implement stuff. Well, when we were talking about the economy, we already, discussed the fact that we can't afford to keep spending money on stuff. And then like it goes back to that question: what does the federal government ever do well? Nothing. And probably the best example is the VA, which is our single-payer healthcare system that we have in this country specifically for our veterans. But you can talk to any veteran and find out that there's no healthcare involved in the VA.
Wow, it's alarming for sure.
So I mean, that would be the first thing I would attack is opening up the market so states aren't restricted, or so companies aren't restricted state by state. They obviously have to know what the regulations are, but they shouldn't be blocked from competing across states. They shouldn't have to set up duplicate companies and duplicate a structure across every state. But the idea of just pumping more federal money into it, every time you add more money, shooting at the same amount of supply, well, you're actually going to create more demand because now more people are going to have that government money, so now they can afford it, so they're going to be placing more demand. But we didn't increase the supply, so the price is just going to keep going up, which is kind of what happened with the ACA. Does that make sense?
Right. It makes a lot of sense, and I love your vision on the tort reform, so I would stick to that. And maybe counterproductive to the, like you said, the lawyers, but I'm sure that would resonate because we're not all lawyers. They're not all lawyers up in DC. So, tort reform, like I think you quoted $20 million for that's the malpractice, or that's how much they typically get to like in a malpractice, like a 1 centimeter. I think was your example that you gave. So they need the doctors need to be to have this insurance for the because I would call it more like a litigious society. Like we're just suing too much. So that's
exactly
part of the reason.
And people treat the civil courts like a lottery, and that's it actually affects a lot of like society, like all the way across. Like it affects hiring, it affects opening no businesses, it affects even trying it, and then regulation as well. Like a lot of these hospitals aren't able to see as much patients because under the Affordable Care Act, in order to keep compliance so they can even get funds from the federally funded programs, they have so much paperwork to do. They're spending 90% of their time on paperwork and 10% of the time on healthcare. Maybe we could provide more service and like lower the average cost if we actually had our healthcare providers providing healthcare instead of filling out paperwork.
Wow. Yeah, so that's enlightening for sure. So all these little things make a big difference. So I would certainly, do my part to just bring attention to these things. Like we have this voice. I call it, I said the voice of reason. So a lot of this, bringing it to the public spotlight, and then people start calling their congressman. People start getting more involved, and I think that's where we rise. Like John F. Kennedy, like we strengthen numbers, rising tide. Like it's like a private conversation. That's when it really gets brought to the attention of the American people. That's where like I think a lot of the change will come. Strength in numbers.
Yep, and that's why like I've actually interviewed a lot of candidates because I think the dichotomy of the Republican Democrat needs to be broken because it's what prevents new ideas from coming in. But after Ross Perot arguably impacted an election, both parties did everything they could to make sure it didn't happen again. And that's filtered down all the way to the local level where it's really hard to get third-party candidates. And then if you get elected to office as a Democrat, then you'll be attacked and excoriated if you don't follow the agenda that the leadership sets. So it's hard to get new solutions in there. And the solution for everybody sitting in Congress is let's spend more money, let's implement more programs, but of course exempt ourselves.
Well,
Like, you know, insider trading's against the law, but nobody seems to notice all these people that have inside information nobody else has are trading stocks. They can't claim that they don't have previous knowledge because by nature of their job they do.
that's right. That's right. So
So
it's for sure. We need a solution, like someone like myself, to just be a voice of reason and just to do my best to try to it's insanity. We're doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, but there at some point has to be a breaking point, and
yeah,
whoever's
and
in
the
this
reality
getting.
is what we're doing at this point isn't doing the same thing over and over again. We're doing the same thing bigger and bigger, and we're not expecting a bigger like blow up in our face, even though we're doing the same thing bigger. So now
Right there.
kind of kind of off to the side of healthcare. I think with your party more than my party would be the abortion thing. So
Right.
what's your stance as far as abortion policy and what the law should be in the United States?
Well, that's a great question, Rob. That's a tough question, and it's a very personal question. When me as a man and I interject and uh, I try to like say, well, I know everything. I'm a man, and I think that's kind of like with the mentality of what I'm noticing of like say the current Republican Party and the Supreme Court, that they just decided we'll throw it back to the states because it's too much. Like the overturning of Roe, which was this was the law of the land, and this was like a freedom for women. So um, but I don't think it gives much women like the current state of the abortion policy. It doesn't not really considering them. So me like when I hear sometimes Republicans say, well, the Democrats don't love the country, and then I could turn it back on them. Well, I don't. That maybe like I'm not. They're not. The Democrats aren't like hugging the flag or whatever. I don't know what you mean by we don't love our country, but I would flip it back and just say I don't really see how you really love women, or you don't love Mother Earth. Like you don't have empathy for like the environment. Would be like you don't really love Mother Earth, like in like your daughter, like if she was a victim of a rape by a relative, like you would kind of force her, like two wrongs don't make a right. So like you're forcing her to carry this child. Like that's our abortion ban in Texas. Like it's been all over any like debate. Colin Allred, and there's they can rattle off the names of women who have they've bled out in the parking lot of different things. I don't think that was really that's not like the best interest of our country. So where do I stand? Peter Phil, the voice of reason. It's a horrible thing, like to think a fetus is growing in a child. You want to think that's a child. It's a living. It's something we should honor and respect. But we also have to respect the woman. The woman is actually carrying that child. Like this is her decision if she wants to carry it to term. It could just be a personal. She doesn't see like the marriage is working out, and she doesn't want to like be stuck with the child. Like she's a working woman, but that's a personal decision. She should be allowed to make that choice. Or it could be like this is a Down syndrome baby. They don't want to carry it because it's gonna have a not a like a exceptional life. So there should be. I think it should be legal up to say 3 months. Like just go back to what we currently have, Roe versus Wade, and we have Planned Parenthood. So
That's
we have. Okay, that's my answer for you, Bob.
yeah. Okay, no, I understand, and and I can under the 3 months I can understand the viewpoint on. Um, so my viewpoint is actually the same as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and that's what most of the mainstream Democrats won't talk about. Bader Ginsburg, who was the Democrat idol for women's rights, said that Roe versus Wade was bad case law and it would eventually be overturned if Congress didn't change anything. Okay. And it was bad case law because it presupposed a right to privacy that doesn't exist anywhere in the Constitution. It took authority over a subject that the Constitution did not grant the federal government. And that's what the overturning of it stated. There was no support for the case law used to create a law. So what it really was legislation created by the bench. Now, prior to that, the laws were based on the states. So who's creating the laws in the states? The representatives of the people of those states elected. So if you don't like the abortion law in your state, you can elect representatives to your state house and state senate that will write abortion law you like, if that's what's important to you. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It does.
So and then there's a lot of like misinformation around it too. The reality is, and of course the there's no mandatory reporting, even though all the information would be anonymous, but the data that has been collected suggests that the instances that are brought up by like rape and incest like that and health of the mother, well, those are all exempted in pretty much every state. I think Texas is a little bit stricter, but life of the mother is definitely covered. But rape and incest is one of those things that are kind of not really provable, and people can just use that excuse. And as soon as you say rape and incest is excusable, then you're going to have a lot more rapes and incest. You get what I'm saying? But based on the statistics under Roe v. Wade, that was like 0.1%, which means 99.9% are abortions for birth control. And the reason I have a problem with that is because where the whole birth control and abortion thing came from was from Margaret Sanger, who was a eugenicist, who did not want black and brown people having babies. And the fact that 99% of abortion clinics are in black and brown neighborhoods, that on its face is disgusting. We have 40 million black people in this country. If it hadn't been for Roe v. Wade, we would have 70 million black people in this country. So the eugenicists got what they wanted, all under the guise of freedom of choice. They got a lot less black people. So like in the name of freedom, we allowed black women to kill black babies. And that to me, since that was the purpose of it, I don't care what else you do with it. Nobody argues for anything that Hitler argued for because it was Hitler. You know what I mean? And this woman was worse than Hitler. She wanted to wipe out anybody who wasn't white. And that's the effect. Yes, white people are having abortions too, but not anywhere near the numbers of black and brown people. And then the argument is, well, it's so they can do better. Well, do you have kids?
Yes, I have my son. Thank God, my son Joel. He's 29. I do have.
And no matter what you do or how you plan, it's always a struggle having kids.
Right, it wasn't easy.
Yeah, but you find a way. Okay, so
right.
What we have, what we have in this country is you can't criticize abortion policy or abortion clinics, but nobody says boo about family planning clinics being firebombed when they're giving people options that don't require an abortion. So again, resorting to violence to get your point tells me your argument's invalid. You get what I'm saying? So now personally, I would say, because I am also a pastor, I would say that, the Bible says, I knew you before you were in the womb. So if you're religious, that means it's a baby. And across the religions, all religions say that's a baby from conception. So the 20% of people that are non-religious, they're going to win out. That doesn't make sense to me. But if we're going to break it down state by state and the states can allow what they can allow, okay, great. But stuff like goes on in Minnesota with failed abortions being born and they leave the baby to die when there's 3 million people waiting to adopt babies in this country is monstrous. It's inhumane. It's disgusting. And it's as bad as everything that the Nazis did. So I think the state should be allowed. I think there should be a limiting factor. But because it's a limiting factor, they say, oh, it's an abortion ban. Texas doesn't have an abortion ban. Texas passed a law that allows abortion up to the time that your baby has a heartbeat. They passed a law allowing abortion, not banning it. You get what I'm saying?
Which is how long was it?
Heartbeat. If there's a detectable heartbeat, they can't perform an abortion.
Okay.
So, and then I'll throw in there when people sit there and make the argument of pro-choice, you might have had more of an argument 60 years ago. Now we have 15 different forms of birth control. and we have the morning after pill, and everybody has a choice to not have sex. So that's 17 decisions that they made. If they got 17 decisions wrong, are we sure this is the person we want to make a decision about whether or not a baby lives?
Right.
Because they've kind of
It's
already proven a bad ability to make decisions.
Yep. And so that's their last safety net. But if it was a safety net and it was there for years, I don't know. But it is it's a very tough call. And where would I stand if I was up there and they said codified Roe versus Wade? I would vote yes to that, because just for a couple of examples I know from personal experience that it's not really it's trying to separate as much as we can men from making decisions for women, and also separating out the church versus state. I'm in agreement with the church, like a lot of the things God like is present, and but we still have to have we have to have exceptions. Like we have to be like I said, I'm calling myself the voice of reason. So just from a reasonable perspective, like
as far as allowing abortion because you get to 24 weeks and your kid's Down syndrome. My soon to be stepson here, he's 32. He's severely autistic, almost nonverbal, like probably lower functioning than Down syndrome. The boy is a gem and a gift, and he had every right to life. You get what I'm saying?
I do.
So will he ever be able to support himself? Absolutely not. But a 3-year-old can't support themselves either. We don't let the mothers kill them because they're inconvenient. So now, even if you make the argument for Roe v. Wade and the trimester system, no Democrat has ever proposed that. Every proposal regarding abortion in the United States has been for abortion until birth. And the laws passed in California since the overturning in California and in Minnesota and other places like that are abortion up to birth. And Walz went far enough to sign allowing the baby to die on the table instead of saving them. And if the mother doesn't want them, okay, then let's find somebody to adopt them. And there's plenty of people that want to adopt. Again, 1 million babies aborted every year, but 3 million parents waiting for a baby to adopt. So it's a tough one. Now, I'm not going to, I gave my perspective. I'm not going to tell you your perspective is wrong. That's just my perspective on it, is that, again, the federal government's already amorphous. It's not in the Constitution that it's something that the government should be involved in, which means it goes to the state. It literally says anything not covered in the Constitution is the purview of the states, so the states decide. So that means I'm horrified by the things that happen in California and Wisconsin. I hope the people in California and Wisconsin at some point decide that's horrifying, but they've decided. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
But here in Texas, the representatives that we elected decided we're going to limit it at a heartbeat. Okay, that's what we decided. And if people in Texas want it to be extended beyond that, they can elect state legislatures that will do that. Does that make sense? It doesn't need, but the federal government doesn't need to tell people in Wyoming that you have to allow the same things that they allow in California. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I see your point about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You're making great points. I'm just thinking about what was currently law and just the few exceptions I was thinking about. And
but that's the thing; it was never law. It was a magically created thing out of the atmosphere. And if you want to say, "Oh, well, it was the law of the land," well, Dred Scott was the law of the land too. But those Supreme Court cases got overturned because they were wrong. And it took, 50 years for Dred Scott to be overturned. It took like 40 years for the laws supporting to get rid of the Jim Crow laws and stuff is unconstitutional. You get what I'm saying? The fact that something's the law of the land does not mean it should be the law of the land, especially if it's based on flawed precedent. And the overturning of Roe v. Wade didn't ban abortion. It meant the states decide. So the people living in a place decide what their abortion right is in their place. And why does somebody in California have the right to tell me, which is Kamala Harris, why does somebody in California have a right to tell Texas how they should do things? When the federal government, when the Constitution says the federal government doesn't have that right.
Great
So
question.
and even Donald Trump has said he would not sign an abortion ban. So he's not for banning abortion either. He thinks there should be reasonable limitations, and the states can decide those limitations. And yes, it's going to be different. Well, if you're going to be out having sex and you want free access to abortion, maybe you should go move to a state that has free access to abortion instead of living in a state where you know it's limited. Just like if you want to smoke pot, don't be upset if you get arrested for smoking pot in a state when it's illegal, when there's states where it's legal.
Right on. 100%.
Or elect people that's going to make it legal. You get what I'm saying?
Right. Things need to be voted on and put to the public like it has been. It's been,
yeah. When you start enforcing the federal government onto the states, when different parts of the country have different values, it's a guaranteed way of fracturing the country, because at some point you're going to cross the line and you're going to get states that just aren't going to take it again. And who knows how another civil war would end up. But if you keep doing it, that's what's going to happen, because that's what actually caused the first Civil War. It wasn't specifically about slavery. It was about the states' rights and the federal government overextending what the Constitution allowed. And they ended up having to go back after the Civil War and amend the Constitution in order to fix it. But they should have done that first, which takes 2/3 of the country to agree to pass anything, not 50 senators and the vice president. You get what I'm saying?
I do.
So the Constitution says you can't do it, so you'd have to have a constitutional amendment on it. Or to me, it legally can't be done, and any law after that would still be struck down under the reasoning under Dobbs that threw out Roe v. Wade. You get what I'm saying?
I do. So.
Because the reasoning behind it is it's not constitutionally sound. So let's see here. Got about 7 minutes. Hopefully he'll be back. I hope he didn't completely bail. So let's get one more. Gun violence. So I'm going to preface this because I don't want it to come out like an aha. Okay.
Okay.
So there's a problem with the gun debate in this country, and it all centers on gun control. Going into this, I'm going to preface it with the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is unique among the amendments. It doesn't spell out a right. It implies a right already exists, and the focus of it is on limiting the government. So have you actually read the Second Amendment? Because I'm always shocked at the people that haven't.
I was just reading. I was reading it, Rob, and just the little preamble, whatever the first lines, and I know it's to sort of paraphrase it, because I can't remember word for word, but I do paraphrase it. It's basically it's a right for right to organize so that we're not overthrown by a government. Like, I can't think of the words, but it's
but that's not what it is.
Okay.
So I read very specifically into it because it had a very specific intention. Okay. So a regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay. That doesn't grant a right. It says the people have the right and the government can't restrict it. That's right. What it says. There's no limiting factor. There's no, but okay. So, and that's the thing. Why are you putting interpretation in? Why did they make the Second Amendment? They made the Second Amendment because they had just finished overthrowing a tyrannical government. What did they consider a militia? Well, the United States didn't have until 1850? The United States didn't have a standing army. We had a militia. What was a militia? Who fought the Revolutionary War? Citizens with their own firearms, their own cannons, their own dynamite, went and served as militia to fight for our independence. So that's what they considered a regulated militia. Everybody had to have guns so we can come in and tell you what to do so we can fight. Okay?
Right.
So their idea was everybody should have guns, and back then everybody did. Everybody had guns. There was no American in 1776 that didn't have a gun. Everyone had guns. Okay? So and this and this states it as though it's obvious the right of the people shall not be infringed. It doesn't say we're granting a right, and some of the amendments are worded as though they're granting a right. This one is not. It just states the rights exist and the government can do nothing with it. Okay? So that's my first point on it. So my second point is there's 400 million guns in this country. But we don't have 400 million shootings a year. So the problem isn't the guns. As a matter of fact, the assault weapons, which don't exist, assault rifles, it's actually, I'll get to that in a second. More people are killed with hammers than all rifles of all kinds, even with the mass shootings. We're not trying to ban hammers. 10 times more people are killed by cars than by guns. We're not trying to ban cars. What do? We require people that have a car to be responsible. You can't buy a gun without a background check. The only place you can is if I sell you a gun, there's not a background check there. But if I sold it to you and you're not legally allowed, I'm in trouble. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So like if you're a felon that's not allowed to have a gun, which again, we get back to the right shall not be infringed thing, and that becomes a problem. But as the laws exist, you know, even that, if I don't have you do a background check before you sell that gun, I'm taking a liability onto myself, which is why most people that do private gun sales, they go and do them at gun shows and sell them to the dealers, but all the dealers there do background checks on every customer. You get what I'm saying? Because if you have a TFL, you have to background everybody that sells, or everybody that you sell to. So then we drive down on like the biggest point on guns, the fact that the majority of the gun deaths are in cities where guns are banned. And in all the other states, all of the mass shootings happen in places where guns are banned. Schools, churches, places where it's already not allowed to bring your gun. You follow what I'm saying? So apparently passing a law making something more illegal doesn't stop the illegal act. And the majority of the mass shooters are not in possession of a gun that they legally obtained anyway, which means passing another law restricting guns isn't going to keep them from getting a gun. Even in England, where they've had a complete ban, you go to the criminal neighborhoods, everybody's got a gun. And their amount of mass killings didn't go down. They actually went up. People are just using machetes and knives and clubs to do the killings instead, if you follow what I'm saying. So now all that being said, I understand your position is probably going to be a little bit different. But with that being the Constitution, what realistically can we do to stop gun violence? And that's why I don't phrase it as a gun control question, because gun control is unconstitutional and gun violence is an issue primarily in cities that Democrats already control. So what do we do?
It's a great question, and I thank you for prefacing it by giving me the facts, and these are true facts. I'm not going to deny any of the things you say, because I'm sure there's a lot of, these are all true facts. So the question was, realistically, what can Peter Pillow, the voice of reason, when I make it up to Congress and I become the next representative for U.S. House Texas District 2, what can I do to realistically stop violence? Well, so there is history. So if we know history repeats itself and these things are likely to occur again, so we really have to think about enforcing or reinforcing some, stability in these institutions where these incidents are taking place, and we need to have more, I would say, counseling. So we need to figure out, like, there needs to be a better system to like do a dragnet and to really sweep these areas of the kid, or for example, whoever's the perpetrator. So we know here's the perpetrator, here's their profile. This is what's happened. We know this is likely to occur again. So how do we nip that in the bud? How do we get a dragnet out there to cover all those things? So if it's realistically stop gun violence, I would say it's more proactive, like us as I'm an educator. I didn't mention that, Rob, but I educate children every day. I'm a ninth grade English teacher, so I've been educating for about 9 years now. So I know there's signs, like there's kids they just whatever, like there's, so I would have a better system to dragnet to like talk to these kids, just like uh, sensitize them, because I think a lot of the problems, Rob, is like it's desensitized from everything from like just us kids we're growing up watching, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween, like that desensitized us. Like now it's more like they're there with a Grand Theft Auto or whatever game that they're playing that's desensitizing them. So like we need to maybe have more, institute some warnings like this is a game. If you do this, like real people will get hurt. So like I would like focus on putting it back onto us as a society to like let people know like there's real consequences for actions, and then as much as we can, like if it takes the FBI or like the local police or whatever, like to be more proactive with trying to prevent, like so if we know this person potentially could be like have these kind of plans that are just with the parents, like it could be with the parents as well, like having like if you see something, say something, like more to try to stop it, and then if it does happen, that's going to be more like it's hard sad to say, like our school needs to have more police, or our church is just more. This is just the reality we're living in, since we can't do much to infringe upon our rights to own guns, so then we have to have more security, if that makes sense. What I said. I'm curious to know your response to any point that I made. What are your thoughts?
Um, I think it's a tough one. I was actually discussing with a candidate for the Texas Board of Education the fact that we need to stop having counselors serve as administrative clerks when we already have administrative clerks that can be working on schedules and stuff with kids.
Right.
Our counselors in the schools need to be healthcare professionals. I think the fact that like 7 of the 8 most recent mass shootings were people that identified as trans or non-binary, not trying to vilify that, but I think our argument of something that was 5 minutes ago a mental illness, and now we pretend it's not a mental illness, and now these people are losing control and doing these horrible things. They happened before that, but they were still mostly mentally ill people, whether it happened under bullying, whether it happened because they're having gender dysphoria, whatever it is. This is clearly happening because of a mental health issue. We pay people to be counselors in the schools, but we don't give them the time to be able to actually interact with the kids. And it's not the kids that come out to seek them out to talk to them that they need to talk to. They need to go and talk to the kids, the loners that are off to the side. They might be like me, who are just focused on studying and doing stuff because I had to get everything done at school because I grew up on a farm. And when I got home, I had work to do. So I was always a loner in school because I had to get my work done. But there are kids out there that are loners in schools because they're being demolished by everybody around them, if that follows.
Yeah.
So I think that the mental health aspect is the issue, because you used to have kids that would like have their guns in the trucks when they went to school because they were going hunting after school, and there weren't school shootings. So
Right.
what's changed? How we treat mental illness and a rapid increase of mental illness. So maybe those are the things that we should be looking for to reduce gun violence. And then, of course, in the urban centers, um, there's a correlationary uh, um, statistic on crime and environment, and there's only one statistic that is very consistent, and that's 2-parent families. And then if you go and look at what all these places where the most of the gun violence happens, well, first you have to like point out that 60% of the gun violence is people committing gun violence on themselves. If you follow, I'm not going to say the S word because it gets kicked off of social media. You know what I mean? So that so then that's obviously the same issue. It's going to be mental health. And then two parents, like two parent families, um like you're like 10 times more likely if you come from a single parent family to end up dropping out of high school or ending up in prison. Like 10 times more likely. And yet we don't support, and it's funny, I'm on the more conservative side of libertarian, but I completely blame Ronald Reagan for this. The no fault divorce. Marriage is hard. If you've been married, it's hard. But making it easier to get out of stuff because it's hard doesn't help, and it does horrible things for the kids. If that makes sense. You know, so we have to look like what's really changed in the last 50 years is all this has gotten more and more common is there's less and less dads in houses. And it really comes down to the dads. So we need to incentivize dads to be fathers. But then again, like I don't know, it's tough. You're going to tell moms if they don't want a baby, they can kill a baby, but you're going to tell dads if you don't want a baby, you're stuck with that baby. So they can't even abandon a baby. So I mean, it's completely crazy. Wouldn't the better solution be to just incentivize families so there's two parent families, then we don't have to abort the babies, we can raise them, and then they have two parents talking to them so they have a stable life and they know how to communicate. Because like I mean they've shown that like if you have one parent, no matter how much you talk to the baby, by the time the kid's like 2 years old, they've heard like 10,000 more words if there's two parents. You know what I mean? So it's like it's crazy. So I think that's the biggest thing. We need to change the culture, and we also have to change the idea that it's just okay to let criminals keep walking around, because crime is like drug use. It always escalates. Now, you can point to rare exceptions where it doesn't, but the recidivism rate is like over 70%. And then once they've committed violent crime, the likelihood of them advancing to murder is like 60%. So, like, we need to really look at what's going on in the society and how we've handled these issues into it going in.
So without a plan to fail, and I'll just leave it at that, Rob. 100%. So thank you for sharing all that. I'm in agreement with 99% of what you said there, Robin. Thank you for sharing your insight. What I'll leave it at is, without a plan, we're planning to fail. And I would love to work on the education, all those that made reference to, because it's coming at us from all angles, like this problem with our culture. Like, so we really need to change the culture. And if we start at base level, like our education system, and if we had a way to get more counseling, like make it maybe harder to, I don't know, it's kind of hard to child-proof or proof everything, like to insulate us so that we won't harm ourselves or our society. But maybe like if you want to get married, say, maybe you have to take a little course in relationships and what are the keys to long-lasting relationships. So if we had more long-lasting, healthy relationships, we'd have like the ability, like you're mentioning, to really talk to kids and like, maybe it's more my point, like sensitize them to like, child, this is a video game here. This is not reality. Or I like your point too about the changing of our culture, and like if something's like a red flag that we're noticing, like we notice something that's not right, like we would call it, like not like it's something that just sort of sticks out like a sore thumb that we can notice. Thumbs up with this child, like, so our counselors need to be, like you said, they need to be healthcare professionals and really able to pivot and to talk to them and really see what seems to be troubling them, and but they don't resort to violence just because or whatever, like have more of an acceptance of these other students, so they don't feel like they're targeted, so they don't feel like they need to lash out. So that's what I'd focus on if I could possibly work on the education committee, like making sure teachers are maybe they need training to our each individual teacher, because there's only so many counselors in a school that could be like viable. But teachers maybe should have to take some have some certification in healthcare so that they can also help with identifying these red flags as they're seeing it, just to try to proof us, like insulate us from some of the madness so that it's just try to have a sane culture as much as possible, considering our times we're living in.
Yep. So and yeah, I mean and so my biggest thing, like, I mean, I'm primarily trying to get like different voices out there. That's the point of my doing my interview series all the way into the election. I do hope that, I mean, I wish you the best of luck. I already told you how I feel about Dan Crenshaw. Like my specific problem with him is the fact that, to me, it seems like he turns his back on veterans a lot, and as a veteran, that's just disgusting to me. So, and like, he's a member of Congress. He doesn't have a right to disrespect anybody who's a constituent, whether he agrees with them or disagrees with them. And the guy just comes across arrogant, like he's better than everything. Well, hey, God bless you, man, that you serve. Thank you for your service. That doesn't give you a right to like dehumanize and minimize people that you disagree with. And the fact that I haven't seen him doing anything to get these people that are being like thrown in jail for rightly like questioning what's the decisions being made. It's disturbing to me, if that makes sense. So those are my two main reasons. My dad was a veteran. My stepdad was a veteran. My brother joined the military. My grandpa was a veteran. Like, long history of military service in my family, and to see a veteran just kind of, to me, like, have the appearance of turning their backs on veterans is beyond me. To kind of wrap this up, I hope after the election, whether you're in office or not, I hope you can come back, because the conversation's good. And it's always nice when people don't just like hammer on about their ideas without like taking time to listen. And like, this is what I do now. Like, my primary role is, taking care of my stepson, and I do other stuff to bring in some money to help out the household. But that's my primary role right now, is taking care of him. So it gives me a little bit more time to read and research. And so I have a lot of facts, and just a lot of what happens doesn't make any sense to me. And, like I pointed out with Kamala, she's like, oh, prices are too high. Well, people need to stop raising the prices. Well, if they stop raising the prices, they go out of business, so it's my first presidential election, I voted for Al Gore. Somewhere between there and September 11th happened. That's what it was. After September 11th, I realized the things the Democrats say sound great, and on an emotional level, you want to get on board with them. And the end goal that they talk about a lot of time is right. Like the end goal with abortion, allow women the freedom to have careers and all that. That's all great. But then when you start looking at the route that they take to get there, a lot of time it's very questionable. And then they use emotional blackmail if you push back against their plan. And so that's why it's great that you're able to have these conversations. So, like, I mean, I hope that after the election, whether you're in office or not, that you'll take the time to come back and visit with me and talk. I really do hope so. I mean, because it would be great. I think you're a great person to talk to. And, I'll even give you any perspective on mine on any legislation you're planning to propose or vote on, because I think I have the time to develop a more nuanced approach to a lot of stuff. And when they're trying to shove a 500-page bill down your throat and say you have 24 hours to decide, it can kind of help with that. You know what I mean?
Of course, that'd be greatly appreciated. And if and when I make it, I'll be sure to call you for come up to testify on some of these bills. It's open for the public,
and
enjoy that.
And as an educator too, as well, I would still like to talk to you about that, because I mean, we got issues in our education system. Like, ever since the Department of Education was created, our education quality's gone downhill. So I've got issues there too. And since that's specifically, what you're doing, and I'd also like to talk about the environmental sciences and some of the misleading information out there as far as environmental statistics. I'd love to talk about that. shoot, depending on how far into it, like I even understand all the way into nanofabrication, string theory. I can talk about anything. So,
Thank you for
just great.
about Crenshaw too, because I noticed the same. Like he dehumanizes. Like I noticed now he's taking pride in something he calls eviscerating, where he'll be in an interview. As soon as something goes wrong, he'll just start insulting in people's intelligence, and he takes pride in that. So yeah, he doesn't represent me. I'm sure he doesn't represent you, Rob. Like the majority of the people who are reasonable folks in our district. So I'm hoping that message will resonate. Like a school teacher, an educator, a reasonable Democrat. I'm not. I'm moderate. Like I'm not extreme. I don't think, and I see myself as like someone who's going to fight the powers that be and not just be like a rubber stamp for Democrats. I'm going to speak up. Like if these Nancy Pelosi, I need some time to read this healthcare bill. Like I'm not a machine. I can't read this and like how they pass. Like you'll know what's in it after you pass it. Like that doesn't pass the test for me like a smell test. So I mean, at least that would be like someone speaking out against it, like that. Like
yeah, in your personal life, you would never sign a legal document without reading it. So why would you sign a legal document that you haven't read that impacts 350 million Americans? It's insane. So again, thank you so much for joining me. Hopefully I can get my the guy who popped in there at the beginning of ours. I think we had the time issue here. He was actually the Solidarity Party candidate for president. So I hope I can get him back. But
well, as for me, I'm on the and it's been a pleasure chatting with you, Rob, and your audience. And I look forward to again like future conversations. And I'm always constantly like I'll never I know it all. So I learned a lot from our conversation.
Yep. And if you get to Congress, keep having the conversations, because no matter how the narrative goes, I guarantee you, like even Dan Crenshaw, I just don't agree with his way on one thing that's like a red line for me. But I don't think he's a bad guy. And I don't think anybody on the right is a bad guy. I don't think anybody on the left is a bad guy. But we used to have conversations between the sides that help find solutions. But now everybody's like, no, we're going to do what I want. No, we're going to do what I want. And you never meet in the middle and find the solutions, because everybody wants to take credit for coming up with the bill. But the bill does no good if it doesn't have a solution. And bad bills are the biggest thing that goes wrong,
That's right. 100%. So it needs to be compromised, win-wins, and not a my way or the highway type of policy. That's what I noticed about him. He's a my way or the highway type of person, and that's not who we are as a congressional district. People like Rob, we have conversations, we work things out, we get win-wins. So that's what I want to do. I want to be the man with a plan who's going to unseat Dan. And so if you want a true leader, vote for Peter, and I'll leave it with that. And again, it's been a pleasure.
Because this idea, if you're not on my team, you got to go down, is ridiculous, and it's got to stop. If it doesn't get fixed, the country will fracture again, just like it did under the Civil War. But instead, what you're going to see is an East Coast and part of the East Coast and pretty much the entire West Coast, and then maybe a couple states in the middle are now part of the new communist states of America. Because if you separate those states out, the communists will take control, no problem. And then you guys lose the middle of America, and good luck finding food. So, but I mean, that's where it goes. If we can't get people to stop vilifying the other side and just listening to each other's perspectives, because then we can probably find solutions in the middle somewhere.
Right.
So thanks again for joining me. I do wish you the best of luck on your race, and make no mistake, if you win your race, like 5 minutes after they call your race, there will be an interview request in your mailbox. So I hope you respond.
That sounds like a plan. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm gonna flip over. Thanks so much for joining me again. That was the U.S. House candidate for Texas District 2, Democrat Peter Filler. So thanks. I think he said his tagline is "Vote for Peter for a leader."
Yep. If you want your leader, vote for Peter.
There
man
you
with the
go.
plane is got and
Works for me. All right. You have a good night, man. And thanks again for joining us here on OTR RVL.
a pleasure. Good night.
All right, guys. So I was supposed to be interviewing right now the Solidarity candidate for president of the United States. He hasn't responded. This is two presidential candidates now. The first one could never get on, and this one, I thought I mentioned that I was in Texas and that it was Central Time, but I don't know what's going on. See, let's make sure that the follow-up came. Okay, I'm gonna follow up with this guy. I'm gonna put his back on hold. Hopefully, I'll be able to get him back on here so we can hold the interview. If not, our next interview will be at 8:30 with Jeff Miller. And Jeff is, let's see here. He is a candidate for, where is it? He is for the Congress 10th Congressional District. So, and he's the Libertarian candidate. So, as a Libertarian, I'm definitely looking forward to talking to him. And like, I don't know if you guys noticed from the Libertarians I spoke to before, they kind of go either direction on a lot of issues. But they're not, number one guiding, their guiding light and everything that they decide as far as policy is liberty. So, all right. Well, thank you guys again for hanging out. Again, if I'm not able to chase down this other interview, then we'll be back. Looks like about 35 minutes. So go. If I don't come right back with Mr. Sonsky, then go ahead and grab a drink, grab a restroom, and we will be back with Jeff Miller.